Hey everyone, welcome to another G News podcast. Well, it looks as if there's trouble in the leadership ranks at the National Party conference. It really looks like the cracks have actually started to worry the backbench, and we are now seeing the very beginnings of a leadership coup as everyone around town who does support the National Party goes quiet. The first signs were really there when Christopher Luxon began to really show that he was under pressure by swearing, using the words fricking Chris Hipkins, and the rattling and the worrying and the panicking was also there from Nicola Willis, who started reaching around in press conferences and demanding that the Labour Party come forward and solve the problems that the economy faces now by releasing all of their policies a year and a half before the next election. So these are classic signs that all is not well, and that the current government are now looking to the opposition to kind of reaching around for straws, like a drowning person, grasping at anything to try and cling to. We've seen them do this with the councils and the irrational idea that the well-beings, which make up only 1% of the rates bill, somehow need to actually be vilified and blamed for the problems that the government has with the cost of living. The growth that they promised that would be here by now. They said this was the darkest period before the dawn back in the middle of 2024. But after that, the dawn never came. They led us into the darkest, deepest recession since 1991. Then there was a blip where there was a brief period over summer where we had 0.8% growth in the first quarter. But that was not that impressive, really. That's still pretty low by long-term average terms. And now we know that we've been in a recession because New Zealanders can feel what it feels like. The data is showing that people aren't spending, that the price of food that's already elevated is continuing to go up, that all of the attempts to performatively suggest that something's going to be done about it were a load of rubbish, and that Nicola Willis was really just playing a game and playing it out in front of us, not being honest with us about the price of butter and bringing it down. She was ineffective. Nothing's going to happen at the supermarket duopoly either. So the kind of things that have been promised haven't been delivered. There's no dawn, there's no growth, and the story that we keep hearing about how we've turned the corner, or we're going to turn the corner, or we're still turning the corner, it's starting to sound like the boy that cried wolf, that after 3 or 4 times of telling us that growth is coming and that there are green shoots, it gets a bit tired. By the 20th time, it's exhausting. But now we've kind of about the 100th time in New Zealand that we're hearing the same story. And even if growth returned and we had 2% or 2.5% over a course of a year, that's not necessarily going to mean anything real to the people that really need the money. The growth's not going to trickle down necessarily into your back pocket. And you've got Christopher Luxon worrying even his most ardent partisan commentators in the press, people that normally hype and promote and look the other way, are now starting to turn the guns on Luxon. Luxon first encountered this when Andrea Vance started calling this out about a week ago, and she took some shots, and so did Atlas Luke over at the Post. This week we're seeing Thomas Coughlan beginning to say that the backbench are worried that Christopher Luxon doesn't seem to give a shit or doesn't seem to care, that he lacks substance in the House of Parliament when answering questions, and that Chris Hipkins is all over him, and that basically somehow or another Luxon thinks he can just get away with canned lines, like, what I would say to you, son, is that you messed up the economy. But we saw that inflation came down in every country. It wasn't like the National Party were different from Australia or Canada or the United States or anywhere else. Every country brought inflation down because inflation came down after the effects of the COVID pandemic and supply shortages and petrol price increases ebbed away. And so international inflation was negative and started to pull things down, whereas our non-tradable inflation or domestic inflation has remained quite elevated. Yes, so they tried to take a lot of credit in fiscal policy for, things that have really been driven around monetary policy. And this kind of dishonest game of trying to steal credit has worn very, very thin, along with the blaming Labour, using lies and dishonesty. So eventually, even the National Party are kind of running out of excuses, and they've had a terrible week. This week, we've encountered the shameful performative dressing up and pretending that infrastructure projects worth $6 billion are going to change things in New Zealand, when they're materially not going to make any difference, because those projects were always going to happen and start when they're always going to start. So there's no big, amazing National Party credit here for bringing about growth. And there was then this boasting about family flop that was meant to go to 21,000 families, but only went to 153 families. And nobody, not even Inland Revenue, could find a single family that got the $250 per fortnight maximum amounts of tax relief and child subsidies. That was so heavily promised by Christopher Luxon and Nicola Willis before the 2023 election. So that was a really bad, broken promise. And then this week we also found out that pay equity, was called Project 10, and Project 10 was a deliberate attempt to hide and conceal the abuse of democracy, using urgency to actually rob 180,000 low-income New Zealanders of their pay equity, and to narrow down what we used to do across industries to single industries within themselves, and to raise the ladders, raise the thresholds, so that people like teachers, who we should be valuing, couldn't actually get their pay equity anymore. And there was all sorts of spin developed. There was a lot of work done in secret, and this was all pulled like an ambush on these people and then denied hard out using spin. So this was kind of really bad, kind of thing that we shouldn't be doing. And it was also that Nicola Willis could pretend that low operational budgets in her Budget 25 were possible and balanced. And at the same time, we played up to Trump, who was calling for all nations to spend more on their military defences. So we just arbitrarily doubled our defence expenditure, and we used pay equity money that we'd stolen from low-income people to pay for things like drones and new ships, etc., which I don't think goes across very well with most New Zealanders, who do not see the government doing anything to help bring down the price of butter, bring down the price of anything, really. So it's all talk, it's all spin. And then we had this voter suppression, and this was laughably tragic. It was so bad that we couldn't really justify how 100,000 voters may miss out. And then people started checking whether they're on the roll, and they found, to their disturbance, that they weren't on the roll anymore. And so there's suspicion, there's a case gone to the High Court about whether or not something crook is going on here. And Paul Goldsmith's explanations about it taking 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks didn't stand up to scrutiny. It is a weak justification that doesn't justify this kind of change. And we see at the same time tariffs suddenly go up from 10% to 15% to the United States, which cost the economy about $1 billion, to go on top of the $1 billion we lost over Nicola Willis and the ferries, in the way that she rashly cancelled those. So, we've got Todd McClay saying, well, now he'll get off his ass and go and do some talking, but it's a bit late, Todd. We would have expected something to have been done earlier, and Winston was a bit useless. He came back full of smug success after meeting Marco Rubio, told everyone to calm down, to pull their heads in, to sort of toe the line with Trump. And what did we get for it? Well, we got a tariff increase from 10% to 15% for our efforts. So that's the outcome that Winston Peters and Todd McClay have delivered. for New Zealand. That's a fail. And so that's a big black mark, which I think is, something that the National Party needs to put their hand up and say, well, look, we didn't manage to change that. We didn't do any work. We weren't focused on changing anything there. And so, this is what happens when you're incompetent. We've seen court cases being taken out of play, like lawsuits that represent 170,000 New Zealanders who have been diddled by the banks, suddenly being scrapped because the National Party have done a deal with the banks and are backing the big corporate banks who are making massive profits at the moment. And saying, well, no, these ordinary New Zealanders shouldn't get compensated for the money they've been diddled with or fooled over by the banks. And sorry about that, but we're on the side of the big banks, not you hundreds and thousands of voters out there. So there's been all of this kind of thing going on this week, and we've also seen bank surcharges being preserved and protected by the National Party. These fees that shouldn't even exist, and they do exist, but they've been passed on to retailers. Small retailers will have to bear that cost or pass it on to consumers, and every business that the Retail Association spoke to said they were going to pass those costs on. So that's inflationary, and that means that the price of everything's going to go up. And that means that people that don't even use any of these surcharge type transactions when they buy things at the shops are suddenly going to have to pay more. This is pensioners that can't afford to pay more, suddenly having to pay more. And this is a direct result of National Party policy that's supposed to fix the cost of living crisis, but it's actually making it far, far worse for everybody, because these people only serve the corporates and the big end of town, not you, the voters. The millions of voters out there. And at the same time, they're having a conference where they're trying to tell it themselves now this weekend that it's been an incredible job, that they've really helped you, that they really understand you, and that you're doing it tough. But none of them are. They're just worried about their own lot. These backbench MPs that rode in the 2023 election are now looking at being a one-term government, and they're going to be out of a job. So odds are on that there's a leadership coup happening here. We're starting to talk about it. Matthew Hooton was talking about how Christopher Luxon is living on borrowed time. So the question of leadership for the National Party should be headlines now. It should be the main focus for weeks and weeks. We shouldn't be talking about Chris Hipkins. He's doing fine. He's coming across with a lot of substance. He's able to answer questions properly. He knows his stuff. His team are experienced. He's got a front bench that really know their stuff, that have the substance and aren't just using cliches and spin to try and slogan their way through. There are also people that are actually looking at workers' rights, the rights of people that are in hardship, someone that will actually do something about homelessness that's exploding on it, instead of boasting about a waiting list. We've got people that will actually address the real problems that we're facing before they become like intergenerational scarring that affects people, and drives up crime and causes our society so many more problems. So we've really, really got to look at what's going on here in politics, because politics is coming for you if you don't address this. You've got to actually vote this government out. And Christopher Luxon, it looks like he's not going to make it to the next election. Who will replace him? So who do you think that should be? I'd really like to hear your comments. I don't think we want Nicola Willis as the next National Party leader. I think she has proven that she's just as bad. She might be quite good at arguing that Labour are to blame for everything, that the pandemic didn't cause inflation in the UK and the pandemic didn't cause inflation in America. But those are lies. Those countries also experienced similar inflation, in fact, higher inflation than we did in New Zealand. So this argument that they've done us all favours doesn't stack up. It's a lie. And so why would we want the next Prime Minister to actually be someone who has shown that they're not going to be straight with New Zealanders? Then we've got Simeon Brown. Simeon Brown He basically is also kind of like another mini Luxon. He's basically just someone that's using slogans and lines. He knows how to recite spin about, we've got more doctors and we've got some more nurses, but we just don't have enough doctors and enough nurses. And nurses are not lying when they say that there are all these unfilled vacancies. They're not lying to you. They're all saying the same thing. They're going on strike. There's patient safety issues, and you've got Brown standing there saying there is no problem, get back to work, take a real terms pay cut because we don't value you, and we'll privatise all the easy operations and we'll leave you guys in the lurch going down the tubes. This will cause more infections, more early deaths, more sorts of problems in our hospitals. And how dare you not do what we tell you to do? And that kind of autocratic, sort of extremist, fundamentalist attitude from Brown just uses some spin. So I don't think Thomas Coughlan should be propping that up and saying that that's a good performance in Parliament. That's actually just weasel words, that's sloganeering, that's kind of a Luxon deflection, I think, because the reality is that we've under-budgeted our public health system, and there's no bones about it. You just talk to any doctor about it, talk to any nurse, they'll tell you the truth. And they have. They've gone on strike this week. You're not safe if they are not safe. So we need to listen to our health professionals because they've no reason to lie to us. Then we've got, who else? We've got the possibility of Chris Bishop, but Chris Bishop is knees deep in fast-track consenting and crony deals, big property, all that kind of thing going, the environmental court, all those projects that Bishop has actually embraced on that appendix that get to skirt around the environment damage. Environment Court had already chucked those out because they're too environmentally damaging. And here they are back again. These people are often donors to the National Party. They're getting kind of like a green light. So this is just a way around. These are private gains and private interests. And it's not the kind of thing that, public money and public is in the public good or the public interest to be doing this kind of thing. So Chris Bishop, he's also somebody that in the past has, represented stuff that causes cancer and early death to children. So I don't think that that's really a person that's material for a prime minister. I think that whole routine where he said there'd only be one store left open up in Northland when he was reciting tobacco industry narratives with Christopher Luxon last year really did him any favours. I think he looks like somebody that's prepared to sell us all out, and I don't think he's playing with a straight bat. So I don't think we can trust Chris Bishop. Who else have we got there as a contender? Well, Erica Stanford appears to be somebody that's hiding and has a bit of a low EQ. She goes into a manic, fast-talking mode. She gets very triggered when asked questions. So I don't think she's got the temperament to be a prime minister. I think she loses her cool and can't actually argue for the kind of things that they're trying to do in education. I think we're seeing someone like Goldsmith not being appropriate either. He's far too crackerjack and doing things that are really baseless when it comes to, he's just delaying things for media, for example. He's done nothing in that space. He's just sitting there on that and doing nothing. The way in which he's playing with numbers around violent crime and justice, that's dodgy as well. So, you don't want somebody that lacks integrity or isn't honest with us, that might play with monthly and annual figures and claim that somehow or another we've actually brought down violent crime based on dodginess like that. So the cupboard is bare. I don't think there's anyone there that stands up and says, well, I'm the obvious candidate to be the next Prime Minister. So this whole Sir John Key experiment with the wealthy CEO that had 7 houses and we've only got to get to know him has proven to be a tragic failure. We might have people like Paul Henry sitting on the board at TVNZ who is going to help to smooth the coverage on One News now. And we might have, people planted in all of these boards. The Health New Zealand board will be specially picked. We've got the regulatory standards bill, and we've got that regulations industry with all hand-picked ACT people or Atlas Network people. So the decks are being stacked with people anyway. So whoever they choose, to be their new Prime Minister, that's going to be a big question for the National Party. I think that's what the real conversation is going to be. And in the meantime, they're going to have some coverage about a speech that's kind of been read out by Christopher Luxon, who's proven that he can do photo ops. He's proven that he can repeat some slogans. They can learn some stuff that he's told to memorize by his spin doctors before he has to do his media rounds. But we've all seen that it's just canned. It's all just canned. There is no understanding or substance. There is no green shoots. There is no growth. There's no return to prosperity for the average New Zealand worker here under this regime. So I think New Zealand should look at all this, become more educated, have conversations, keep talking to each other. And I do think we really do need to vote this lot out for our own sake, for the sake of our communities, for the sake of our culture even, our history and everything, because it's all under attack. Earlier this week I spoke to Vincent O'Malley, who was saying undoubtedly, our history in this nation is under attack by this government, who are trying to do everything it can to kind of like preserve these ridiculously ignorant positions about, the past. And we really need to stop that happening. We need to get back to a place where history is important, where our relationships with each other are much better, and where we educate ourselves about what really happened. We honour Te Tiriti in this country, and we go forward in our own independent way. We don't kowtow to foreign policy. We don't just suddenly start up an FBI office in Wellington without consulting the public about whether that's a good idea or not, because once you've done it, you can't undo it. You're basically selling us all out. That's what I would say is happening. This country is being sold out. They're going to destroy and erode workers' rights in August. We're going to see the situation where fire at will is actually brought in. It's much closer to that. You won't be able to take up a personal grievance anymore in this country if you earn over a certain amount of money. So they're taking away your rights. They're breaking your rights when it comes to voting. They're taking those rights away. They're breaching the Bill of Rights. There's this kind of regulatory standards bill, which is actually just going to impose far-right libertarian values into all of our lawmaking. And Christopher Luxon is backing that to the hilt. He's saying it's going to make us more productive, but he's not seeing all the dangers. He's not talking about all the downsides and all the failures of his policies. He's just trying to bright side sell. It's like a vacuum cleaner throwing dirt on your carpet with his foot in the door, pushing his way in. So that's all I had to say. This is Oniroa Beach, and it's a beautiful day here on Waiheke Island. And I hope you're having a beautiful day too. It's a lovely Saturday. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.
Yeah, right.